Commander Park Minute-Ho stood on the bridge of the human observation ship, watching the massive Velthani research station through the main viewing screen. The station had once been a marvel of alien engineering, its crystalline walls glowing with soft blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Now, sections of it flickered and went dark every few minutes, like a dying star losing its final breath. The Velthani people moved through their failing station like shadows of their former selves. Minute-Ho had studied their species during his academy training. They were tall and elegant, with skin that seemed to be made of living glass. Soft robes flowed around their thin bodies, and intricate patterns of light used to dance beneath their translucent skin. Those patterns told stories, showed emotions, and connected them to their living crystal technology in ways humans could barely understand. But now those patterns were fading. "Sir, another power crystal just failed in Section 7, reported Lieutenant Kim Sojin from her position at the communication station. Her voice carried the weight of 6 months of watching an entire civilization slowly die. "That's the fourth one today." Minute-Ho nodded grimly. The techno-plague had been consuming Velthani technology for half a year now, and there seemed to be no way to stop it. What made it worse was that the plague didn't just destroy their machines, it severed their connection to the living crystals that kept their bodies functioning. Without that connection, the Velthani would slowly fade away until nothing remained. The bridge doors opened with a soft hiss, and Elder Thalven entered. The Velthani leader moved carefully, each step deliberate and slow. Where once his bioluminescent markings had blazed with the wisdom of centuries, now only faint traces remained, like the last embers of a dying fire. "Commander Park," Thalven said, his voice like whispers of wind through crystal caves, "I bring news from the Galactic Council meeting." Kim Sojin looked up from her console, her fingers dancing across the controls as she accessed the latest transmissions. "The final vote just came through, sir. 4 to 7 member species voted to maintain the quarantine around our system. 0 species voted to provide aid or medical assistance." The words hit the bridge like a physical blow. Minute-Ho felt his hands clench into fists at his sides. 4 to 7 species, civilizations that had existed for millions of years, that claimed to value life and wisdom above all else, had decided that the Velthani were too dangerous to save. "Your people were not part of that vote, were they, Commander?" Thalven asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "No," Minute-Ho replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Humanity doesn't have a seat on the Galactic Council yet. We've only been part of the interstellar community for 50 years. Most species still see us as children, too young and too reckless to have a voice in important matters." Thalven's fading markings flickered with what might have been amusement. "Perhaps that is a blessing, young Commander. The old and wise have learned when it is practical to abandon hope. The young still believe that impossible things can happen." As if summoned by his words, another section of the station went completely dark. Through the viewing screen, Minute-Ho could see Velthani technicians working desperately to reroute power, but their tools were failing one by one. The plague consumed everything it touched, turning sophisticated quantum resonance technology into lifeless metal and crystal. The plague itself was unlike anything the galaxy had ever encountered. It fed on the quantum frequencies that every advanced civilization used for their technology. The moment it touched a quantum system, it would spread like wildfire, destroying everything from starship engines to medical equipment to the communication networks that held galactic society together. The mighty Krathari Empire had lost 3 of their most advanced research vessels trying to study the plague. The Nexari Trade Federation, known for their willingness to trade with anyone, had completely banned all contact with the Velthani system. Even the Altorans, whose medical ships traveled the galaxy helping anyone in need, had been forced to withdraw after losing 2 hospital vessels to the contamination. Minute-Ho walked to the observation deck, where the massive viewing windows showed the Velthani homeworld spinning slowly below. He had seen pictures of the planet before the plague, a breathtaking world of crystal spires that reached into the clouds, floating gardens that drifted through the sky like living jewels, and vast networks of crystalline tunnels that carried both transportation and communication throughout the planet. Now the world looked brown and lifeless. The crystal spires had gone dark and many had collapsed. The floating gardens had crashed to the surface, leaving ugly scars across continents. The planet that had once been called the most beautiful world in the galaxy now looked like a dying ember. "How long do your people have?" Minute-Ho asked quietly. Thalven joined him at the window, his reflection ghostly in the reinforced glass. "Our specialists estimate perhaps 2 months before the last of our children fade. The plague has spread to every Velthani colony and outpost. We are not just losing our technology, Commander. We are losing our connection to the crystals that sustain our life force itself." The elder's voice carried no anger, no desperation, only a deep sadness that seemed to fill the entire room. We have accepted our fate. The council has made their decision, and we understand their fear. We ask only one thing, that someone remembers us as we were, not as we have become. Somewhere in the distance, another distress beacon fell silent. Minute-Ho knew it probably came from one of the outer settlements, where families were spending their last days together, waiting for the inevitable end. But as he stood there, watching an entire civilization prepare to die with dignity, Commander Park Minute-Ho made a decision that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. Captain Lee Daeun ran through the corridors of Lunar Base so fast that junior officers had to press themselves against the walls to get out of her way. She clutched a data pad in her hand, its screen showing urgent messages from Commander Park Minute-Ho in the Velthani system. The messages had been coming for 3 days now, each one more desperate than the last. She reached Admiral Choi Sung-ho's office and burst through the doors without knocking or waiting for permission. The Admiral looked up from his desk, surprised by her sudden entrance, but Daeun was already activating the holographic display system. "Sir, you need to see this right now," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "Commander Park has been sending reports from the Velthani system for 3 days straight. The situation out there is much worse than we originally thought." The hologram flickered to life, showing the Velthani star system 37 light-years away from Earth. The images were heartbreaking. Once magnificent crystal cities lay in ruins. Starships that had sailed between the stars for thousands of years now drifted dark and powerless. Entire planets that had glowed with bioluminescent life were now brown and dead. "They're not just dying from the plague," Daeun continued, her hands gesturing at the horrible images. "They're being systematically abandoned by every species in the galaxy. Ships that used to bring supplies and medicine have stopped coming. Communication networks have been cut off. Even their oldest allies have turned their backs on them." Admiral Choi leaned back in his chair, studying the data that scrolled across the holographic display. The Velthani had been one of the galaxy's most respected civilizations for millions of years. Their technology had inspired countless other species. Their wisdom had helped resolve wars and conflicts across dozens of star systems. Their art and music had touched the hearts of beings from every corner of known space. "What does the Galactic Council have to say about this?" the Admiral asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. "Nothing," Daeun replied, her voice filled with barely controlled anger. "They've written off the entire Velthani species as a lost cause. According to their official statement, the risk of the plague spreading is too great to justify any rescue attempts. They've decided it's better to let an entire civilization die than to risk contamination." The Admiral stood up and walked to the massive viewport that dominated one wall of his office. Through the reinforced glass, he could see Earth rising beyond Lunar's gray horizon like a blue and white jewel against the black of space. It was a beautiful sight that never failed to remind him of how far humanity had come in such a short time. Just 50 years ago, humans had been confined to a single world, dreaming of the stars but unable to reach them. Now they had colonies on dozens of worlds, ships that could cross the galaxy, and diplomatic relations with hundreds of alien species. But they were still the newcomers, still the young species that older civilizations looked down upon with a mixture of amusement and concern. "Captain," Admiral Choi said slowly, "we have 17 deep space ships within range of the Velthani system. Those ships could reach them in about 4 days if they left immediately. But we need to think about what this would mean for humanity's relationship with the galactic community." Daeun stepped closer to the Admiral's desk, her eyes blazing with determination. "Sir, we've spent 50 years building diplomatic relationships with the galaxy. 50 years of proving that humans deserve respect and a place among the stars. But with all due respect, what's the point of being part of a community that abandons its weakest members when they need help the most?" The Admiral turned away from the viewport to face her. "The Galactic Council specifically forbade any species from making contact with the quarantine zone. They've made it clear that any violation of this order could result in immediate expulsion from the galactic community. We could lose everything we've worked for." "The Council didn't ask us to vote," Daeun replied firmly. "We weren't part of their decision to condemn an entire species to death. We don't have to follow orders we never agreed to give." The office fell silent except for the soft hum of the life support systems and the distant sounds of the space station around them. Admiral Choi stared out at Earth, thinking about the choice before him. He could play it safe, follow the Council's orders, and watch an entire civilization die from a distance. Or he could risk everything humanity had built to save people they barely knew. Finally, he reached for his personal communicator and activated the ship-wide broadcast system. This is Admiral Choi Sung-ho to all deep space commands in the Sol system. I am authorizing a humanitarian relief mission to the Velthani system. Classification: volunteer only. Any crew member who participates in this mission should understand that they may not be coming home. The Galactic Council has forbidden contact with the quarantine zone, and we may face serious consequences for defying their orders. Within 6 hours, 17 human ships were racing through hyperspace toward the Velthani system. Captain Lee Daeun commanded the medical vessel Indomitable, her cargo holds filled with basic supplies and old-fashioned electromagnetic technology that might, just might, prove immune to whatever was killing the Velthani. The human ships were loaded with primitive equipment by galactic standards. Simple computers that used mechanical switches instead of quantum processors. Power generators that relied on basic electromagnetic principles rather than exotic matter. Medical equipment that would have seemed ancient to most alien species. But as they approached the quarantine zone, Daeun began to wonder if being primitive might actually be an advantage. As the human fleet broke through the quarantine barrier that had kept all other species away, Daeun opened a communication channel on all frequencies. Velthani vessels, this is the Terran Relief Fleet. We have received your distress calls. We're coming to help. 12 minutes later, a weak signal came back from Elder Thalven, his voice trembling with disbelief and hope. Human ships, but why would you risk this? Your species barely knows us. We have no alliance, no trade agreements, no shared history. Captain Lee Daeun smiled as she looked out at the dying Velthani ships ahead of them. Because no one should have to die alone. Dr. Yoon Jae-minute wiped sweat from his forehead as he worked in the makeshift laboratory aboard the human medical ship Indomitable. 3 weeks had passed since the human fleet arrived in the Velthani system, and he had been working almost non-stop trying to understand the plague that was killing an entire civilization. The laboratory looked nothing like the advanced research facilities he was used to. Instead of sleek quantum computers and holographic displays, he was surrounded by machines that would have looked at home in a museum. Vacuum tubes glowed softly in metal boxes, mechanical relays clicked and buzzed as they processed data, and thick cables snaked across the floor connecting primitive computers that used simple electrical switches. But these old-fashioned machines were the only ones that could function in the plague zone. Every piece of advanced technology that other species used had failed within hours of entering the Velthani system. Only human equipment, built with stubborn simplicity, could survive. Captain Lee Jae-minute called over the communication system. I think I understand what we're dealing with here. This plague isn't just randomly destroying technology. It's specifically targeting quantum resonance frequencies. Captain Lee Daeun's voice came back through the speakers, tinged with exhaustion from weeks of coordinating rescue operations. Explain it to me in simple terms, Doctor. What does that mean? Every advanced civilization in the galaxy builds their technology around quantum mechanics, Jae-minute explained, carefully connecting a human power cell to a dying Velthani crystal. They manipulate matter at the quantum level to create computers, engines, weapons, even their communication systems. The plague feeds on those quantum frequencies like a parasite. And human technology doesn't use quantum mechanics. Jae-minute laughed, though there was little humor in it. Not really. We're too primitive for that. When other species were learning to manipulate quantum states, we were still building computers with mechanical switches and copper wires. Most aliens think we're backward because of it. Elder Thalven shifted on his medical bed nearby, watching the human doctor work with growing hope. The Velthani leader's condition had improved since the humans arrived, though he was still weak. His bioluminescent markings, which had been nearly invisible when the humans first found him, now flickered with faint patterns of light. Your primitive machines truly cannot be infected by the plague? Thalven asked. That's right, Jae-minute replied, making final adjustments to his hybrid device. The plague is looking for quantum signatures that simply don't exist in human technology. It's like a virus that only attacks specific types of cells. Since our machines work on completely different principles, the plague just ignores them. He stepped back and activated the device. A human power cell, crude and simple by galactic standards, began feeding energy into a Velthani biocrystal. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the crystal began to glow with soft blue light, and the life support readings for 3 Velthani children in the next room started to improve. It works. Jae-minute shouted with excitement. We can create hybrid systems. Our power sources can feed their biotechnology without triggering the plague. But his celebration was cut short by the sharp wail of proximity alarms throughout the ship. Red warning lights flashed as every human vessel in the fleet detected the same thing at once. Captain Song Haijin's voice crackled over the communication system from the escort ship Defiant. Her words sent a chill through everyone who heard them. Multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace. Big ones. Looks like Krathari dreadnoughts and Nexari battle cruisers. They're here to enforce the quarantine. Through the laboratory's small viewport, J-Minute could see the massive alien warships materializing out of the swirling energy of hyperspace. The Krathari vessels were dark and angular, built like weapons themselves. The Nexari ships were sleeker but no less dangerous, their hulls gleaming with advanced armor that could deflect most known weapons. The lead Krathari ship, a massive dreadnought called the Iron Talon, immediately began broadcasting on all frequencies. The voice that came through was harsh and commanding, filled with the authority of a species that had ruled a galactic empire for thousands of years. Human vessels, you are in direct violation of Galactic Quarantine Protocol 7. You have entered a restricted zone and made contact with contaminated beings. Withdraw immediately or face forcible removal. Admiral Park Sung-woo had arrived with reinforcements just 2 days earlier, bringing the human force up to 23 ships. His response came from the command vessel Tenacious, and his voice was calm but firm. Krathari Command, this is Admiral Park of the Terran Relief Fleet. We are conducting humanitarian operations to save civilian lives. We will not abandon these people to die. You risk contamination of the entire galaxy, the Krathari commander replied, his voice rising with anger. Your primitive understanding cannot comprehend the danger you are creating. The plague must be contained, even if it means the extinction of the Velthani. Dr. Yoon looked up from his work as more Velthani children began to respond to the hybrid technology. Their bioluminescent markings were growing brighter, and their vital signs were stabilizing for the first time in months. He activated his communication link to the bridge. Captain Lee, tell Admiral Park something for me. We're not primitive. We're exactly what these people need. Our simple technology is the key to saving them. Outside, the Krathari and Nexari ships began powering their weapons systems. Energy readings spiked as particle cannons and plasma artillery prepared to fire. The alien warships moved into attack formations, ready to destroy any human vessel that refused to withdraw. But the human ships didn't retreat. Instead, they moved closer together, forming a protective screen around the helpless Velthani colony ships. 23 human vessels, vastly outnumbered and outgunned, placed themselves between the alien military forces and the dying civilians they had come to save. Admiral Park's voice came over the communication system one more time, reaching every human ship in the fleet. This is Admiral Park to all vessels. Maintain your positions. No one fires unless fired upon. And no one abandons their post. Today we show the galaxy what it means to stand with those who need help. In his laboratory, Dr. Yoon continued working as the crisis unfolded around him. More hybrid devices came online, bringing hope to Velthani families who had given up all chance of survival. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes being primitive was exactly what the situation required. The first shot of what would become known as the Battle of Velthani came without warning. Captain Kim Minute-seo was standing on the bridge of the medical ship Mercy, watching her crew load another group of Velthani refugees into the cargo bay, when a bright flash of plasma energy streaked past the main viewport. The energy beam came so close that it overloaded 3 of the ship's sensor arrays, filling the bridge with the smell of burning electronics. All human ships, this is Admiral Park, came the calm voice over the communication system. Maintain your current formation. Continue rescue operations. Do not return fire unless I give the direct order. What happened next was unlike anything in the recorded history of galactic warfare. The massive Krathari and Nexari warships began firing on the human fleet with devastating weapons designed to destroy military targets. Plasma cannons sent streams of superheated energy across space. Missile batteries launched volleys of explosive projectiles. Energy beams capable of cutting through starship hulls swept across the battle zone. But the human ships did not fight back. Instead, they absorbed the punishment while continuing their rescue mission. The escort vessel Defiant took a direct hit from a Nexari missile that completely destroyed its port section, leaving a gaping hole in the ship's hull. Atmosphere and debris spilled out into space, but the ship's medical bays remained operational and continued treating wounded Velthani civilians. The medical ship Indomitable, where Dr. Yoon Jae-minute was still working to save Velthani children with his hybrid technology, took 17 direct hits from Krathari plasma cannons. Each impact shook the ship violently and knocked out more systems, but Dr. Yoon never stopped working. As the battle raged around him, he brought another dozen Velthani children back from the edge of death. Lieutenant ODSOM was piloting Shuttle 7 through the crossfire when she saw the human cruiser Courageous take a massive hit that tore through its main hull. The ship began venting atmosphere and debris, but its shuttle bays were still launching rescue pods filled with Velthani refugees. "Control, this is Shuttle 7, she transmitted, dodging a piece of wreckage that spun past her small craft. "The Courageous is badly damaged and losing air. Request permission to assist with their evacuation." The response came back immediately from the Fleet Command Center. "Negative, Shuttle 7. Continue with Velthani evacuation operations. The crew of Courageous are volunteers. They knew the risks when they signed up for this mission." Across the battle zone, something extraordinary was taking place that had never been seen before in galactic history. Independent news crews from the neutral Thesari Collective were broadcasting live images of the battle to the entire galaxy. Billions of beings across hundreds of worlds watched as human ships formed protective walls around helpless Velthani vessels. They saw human crews dying to save a species they barely knew, asking for nothing in return except the chance to help. Captain Han Sabin was commanding the cruiser Resolute when Krathari boarding pods attached to his ship's hull. He could hear the sound of cutting tools as enemy soldiers prepared to break through the airlocks and take control of his vessel. But instead of preparing to surrender, he opened a communication channel to all nearby Velthani ships. "This is Captain Han of the Resolute to any Velthani vessels in the area. We are about to be boarded by Krathari forces, but Shuttle Bay 2 is still operational and clear. Any refugees who still need evacuation, come to us now. We will get you out safely." Even as enemy soldiers cut through his ship's defenses, Han continued coordinating the evacuation of Velthani civilians. Elder Thalven stood on the bridge of the human command ship Tenacious, watching the tactical display as human vessels burned and died around the Velthani fleet. Tears ran down his ancient face as he turned to Admiral Park Sung-woo. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why are your people dying for us? We have no alliance with humanity. We offer you no trade agreements, no military support, no valuable resources. Why are you sacrificing everything to save us?" Admiral Park stood quietly watching the display screen as another human ship went dark, its crew dead but its mission complete. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of speaking for all humanity. "Because someone has to stand up for what is right," he said simply. "Because abandoning people in need when you have the power to help them is not who we choose to be as a species." The tide of battle began to change when an unexpected voice joined the communication network. Captain Veltar of the Thesari observation vessel Ocean's Dream had been watching the battle from the neutral zone, documenting everything for the galactic news networks. But as she watched human ships die while protecting Velthani civilians, she could no longer remain neutral. "Krathari Command, this is Captain Veltar of the Thesari collective ship Ocean's Dream. We cannot stand by and watch the slaughter of beings who are only trying to save innocent lives." The sleek Thesari vessel broke formation from the observer fleet and moved to position itself between the Krathari attackers and the human rescue ships. Its powerful defensive shields absorbed enemy fire that would have destroyed smaller human vessels. More ships began to move. The Insectoid Zon Collective, known for their careful neutrality in galactic conflicts, arrived with a fleet of their distinctive hive ships. The vessels formed defensive positions around human medical shuttles, their multiple hull segments working together to create protective barriers. The energy beings of the Lumina Consortium, who rarely took physical form, manifested as ships of pure light that blazed across the battle zone. They positioned themselves to shield human rescue operations, their energy forms absorbing attacks that would have been deadly to conventional vessels. Within minutes, ships from dozens of species were arriving in the Velthani system. Some came to help with rescue operations. Others came to provide defensive support. All of them had seen the live broadcasts of humans dying to save strangers and decided they could not stand aside. Admiral Park opened a communication channel to every ship in the system, human and alien alike. "This is Admiral Park Sung-woo to all vessels in the Velthani system. Today we stand not as separate species competing for resources or power. Today we stand together as beings who refuse to let others suffer alone when we have the power to help. We stand with you." The response came from dozens of species, broadcast in dozens of different languages, but the message was the same from all of them: "We stand with you." 6 months after the Battle of Velthani, Ambassador Lee Youngjin walked through the corridors of the Great Assembly Hall on Nexus Prime, the capital world of galactic government. Everything had changed since the crisis. The massive building that housed the Galactic Council had been completely redesigned. Where once the seats had been arranged by the age and power of different species, with the oldest civilizations sitting in positions of honor at the front, now they were organized by something entirely different. The new seating arrangement was based on each species' contribution to galactic humanitarian efforts. The Velthani, who had been saved from extinction, sat in places of honor. Next to them sat the human delegation, their simple uniforms contrasting sharply with the elaborate robes and ceremonial armor worn by representatives of older civilizations. Li Yongjin took his place at the speaker's podium and looked out at the assembled representatives of over 200 species. Many of these beings had been present 6 months ago when the council voted to abandon the Velthani to their fate. Now they listened carefully as he spoke about the lessons learned from the crisis. The hybrid technology that Dr. Yoon Jae-minute developed during the emergency has applications far beyond containing the technoplague, Lee reported to the assembly. We have successfully combined human electromagnetic systems with the technologies of 17 different alien civilizations. These hybrid systems are immune to quantum-based attacks and can serve as backup infrastructure for critical systems across the galaxy. Dr. Yoon himself sat in the gallery, still wearing the simple work clothes he preferred over formal diplomatic attire. He had become something of a celebrity across the galaxy, not for his scientific achievements, but for his refusal to stop working even while his ship was under direct enemy fire. Elder Thalven rose slowly from his seat in the Velthani section. His movements were graceful now, no longer the painful shuffling of a being near death. His bioluminescent markings blazed with patterns of light that told stories of hope and gratitude. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly through the vast hall. 6 months ago, my people were preparing to die with dignity, he said, his words translated simultaneously into hundreds of languages. Our children were fading, our cities were going dark, and the galaxy had decided we were too dangerous to save. But one species chose compassion over politics. One species decided that doing what was right mattered more than following orders. The children of my people live today because humanity refused to abandon us. Captain Veltar of the Visari Collective, who had been the first alien commander to break ranks and support the human rescue mission, now served as chair of the new Council Oversight Committee. She stood to present the committee's final report on the reforms that had been implemented since the crisis. The old system failed because it allowed fear to overcome compassion, she announced. Under the new galactic humanitarian protocols, no species may be abandoned due to medical crisis, technological failure, or natural disaster without first exhausting all possible aid options. Furthermore, such decisions must be unanimous among all council members, not decided by simple majority vote. Admiral Park Sung-woo, now bearing the rank of Galactic Defense Coordinator, smiled as he watched the proceedings from the military section of the gallery. The human delegation had earned their permanent seat on the council not through conquest or economic pressure, but through the simple act of refusing to walk away when others needed help. It was a precedent that had changed galactic politics forever. A communication signal chimed softly through the hall's speakers. Captain Kim Sojin, now commanding the joint Human Velthani Research Vessel Unity, transmitted her report from the restored Velthani homeworld 37 light-years away. Council members, I am pleased to report that the Velthani recovery is proceeding ahead of schedule, her voice said through the speakers. The crystalline cities are back online and functioning better than ever. Bioship construction has resumed in all major shipyards. The first hybrid technology medical stations are operational and serving patients from 12 different species. Most importantly, the technoplague has been officially declared contained and no longer poses a threat to galactic civilization. As the formal session concluded, something unprecedented happened. Representatives from over 100 different species approached the human delegation. Beings who had never spoken to humans before, civilizations that had considered humanity too young and primitive to take seriously, all came forward with the same message. Some offered formal treaties of friendship and cooperation. Others proposed joint research projects or trade agreements. But the most meaningful exchanges were simple statements of gratitude and respect, along with promises that such abandonment would never be allowed to happen again. Ambassador Lee stood at the great observation deck of the station, watching the diverse crowd of beings below. In one corner, Velthani children played games with young human officers, their laughter filling the air with sounds of joy that had been missing from their species for months. In another area, Krathari military commanders discussed defensive strategies with human admirals, the same beings who had been shooting at each other just 6 months earlier. The galaxy feels smaller now, Lee said to his aide, Major Choi Mineta, as they watched the interactions below. More connected. More united. Do you think it will last? Choi asked. Will they remember this lesson when the next crisis comes? Lee smiled as he watched a group of young beings from a dozen different species working together on a research project. I think they will. We proved that doing the right thing, even when it's difficult and dangerous, can change everything. We showed them that the most powerful force in the universe isn't advanced technology or military might. It's simply refusing to let others face their darkest moments alone. The Velthani had been abandoned by the galaxy when they needed help the most. But humanity had declared, "We stand with you," and everything changed. The galaxy had learned to answer, "We stand with you too."